Good morning, Facebook, and those watching other streaming avenues. It's a beautiful, beautiful morning here on Easter morning, and it's a little different. It's a little bit of a different Easter morning for us. Many of us are feeling a bit anxious and isolated, all because we are trying to stop the spread of this COVID-19 virus. Across our nations, non-essential businesses are closed, schools out until who knows when, and public gatherings are essentially banned. It's like we're living in a movie, right? It's almost like we're living in a movie. This is a weird time in our world right now, especially here at Easter. How can there be rejoicing? How can there be celebration and celebrating together on this beautiful Easter morning? These are questions that we are asking ourselves this morning, and it's a bummer. It really is. For the past 4 or 5 years, I have loved this service. I have loved, this has been no doubt my favorite service of the year. We show up before sunrise, it's always cold, but as we stand up and we start to sing, we start to warm. We start to warm up. Then the sun breaks through. It hasn't really, cloud covered, but the sun breaks through and we begin to celebrate. We celebrate, we come together in a loving and an intimate way. And as we end the service, we're ready for the day because we have encountered the living Jesus. Everything changes. Everything is different. And as we see in our gospel lesson, there are a range of emotions, almost like what we're facing right here today. Mary was going to the tomb while it was still dark. I would imagine that she was feeling some type of isolation, very, very similar to what we're feeling here. I'm sure that she was in so much pain around the death of Jesus, around her teacher, just days before. She watched her Lord and her Savior beaten, nailed on a cross, and left there to bleed and suffocate and die. She watched as the body was taken down and wrapped in spices and strips of linen and laid in a tomb. Then a large stone rolled in front of the tomb to keep the body inside and to keep people out. Think about what Saturday would have brought. It was the Sabbath and no one was allowed to work. No one could do anything. The followers of Jesus feeling lonely, feeling despair, feeling helpless, maybe even confused. Can you imagine what the scene would look like on the Sabbath? Jesus told them that he was going to be arrested, that he was going to be tried and going to be killed. But they didn't believe that this was actually going to happen. This was their king. This was their Messiah. It seemed too bad to be actually true. They left their life to follow him. They had 3 awesome years of witnessing miracles after miracles. They saw him love like no other. They saw him heal. They saw him heal the sick, raise the dead, cure the insane. He was the glue that held it all together. Surely he can't be dead and gone forever. What are we going to do now? Can you imagine it? The darkness that was looming over them, the pain and the despair. Maybe this year, more than ever, we can get a little bit of a sense to what that felt like. There are some of us that feel like this virus is the end of the world. Like things can't get any worse. We are all missing events in our lives. We are all missing things, special events, missing friends, missing families. Communication has been limited to videos, Facebook, Zoom meetings. It's difficult. It really, really is. We have to find a new reality right now. People walking the streets covering their faces with masks. Kids can't have friends over. We can't worship together. We are told to shelter into place. For those who live alone, this feeling is more present. Most of these things are not available right now. And we really don't know when things will return to the normal that we knew. So I ask, how are we to celebrate the resurrection when we feel so isolated, while we feel so alone? Well, on that first Easter morning, Mary was crying outside of Jesus' tomb. She was in darkness, mourning the loss of her teacher, the one who meant everything to her. And when she got there, she saw the stone rolled back and the tomb was empty. I can just imagine her freaking out, her losing it, frantically looking around for the body of Jesus, and naturally thinking the worst. At last, she saw the angels sitting there where Jesus' body had been, and they questioned her about why. Why are you crying? They have taken my Lord away, and I do not know where they put him. But when she turned around, Jesus was standing right there, but she wasn't aware of him. Jesus was standing there waiting to show her that he is alive, that he is well, but she wasn't focused on who it was. She wasn't looking for the living Jesus. She was looking for a body. And the last image that went through her mind was him on the cross. She thought Jesus was the gardener. It makes sense. The gardener would have been the only one there at that time. But Jesus called her by name. And in an instant, she recognized Jesus. Her focus changed. She was able to see. Beloved, have you ever heard Jesus call your name? If you have, you know that it changes everything. This allows us to refocus and look and fix our eyes back onto the resurrected King. When Jesus walked the earth, he ministered to those who were isolated. Remember in Mark chapter 5, Jesus cast out demon of a man who was isolated from society. He was said to be crazy and was kicked out of the community. When they found Jesus and this man talking together and hanging out together, it was said that he was in his right mind. He was dressed and sitting at the feet of Jesus. What a place to be. And remember when Jesus was talking to the woman at the well and asks for a drink of water. She is surprised. However, after talking a bit, this conversation ultimately leads her back to be integrated with her community as she brought other people to Christ. Brothers and sisters, when you feel isolated, when you feel alone, remember that Jesus has a special place for you in his heart. He has a special place for the widows, the orphans, the lepers, the blind, the prisoners, those who are living on the alone in the margins of society. Think about it. I'm sure that Jesus felt this way as he hung on the cross, as heaven looked away. He cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" He did this for you and for me. Jesus can relate to what we were going through. Jesus has empathy. Jesus has compassion. So how are we to celebrate this Easter morning in a time of isolation and a time of aloneness? If we are to keep reading in John, we see that the disciples were still locked away. They were afraid. They were alone. They were isolating themselves, just like we are. But they weren't hiding because of this virus. They were hiding because they thought that those religious leaders were coming after them as they did Jesus. They were sheltering in place, similar to us being isolated and alone. Then Jesus shows up and says, "Peace be with you." Jesus stood right there among them. He was with them then, and he said he will be with them always. This includes us. Beloved, this includes us. Jesus is right here. He will always be right here with us, period. No question. And yes, it is true that we can't celebrate Easter the way we have before. But we are reminded that Jesus will rise anyways. We are reminded that Jesus doesn't need traditions. Jesus doesn't need customs to be present in our lives. Just like always, Jesus comes to us in our loneliness. Jesus comes to us in our tears. He comes to us in our fears and our anxiety. Jesus stands amongst us and tells us, "Peace be with you," and assures us that everything will be okay. Even though it might not seem like it, he assures us that everything will be just fine. And we know this because Christ has risen. We know this because death has been defeated. We know this because, spoiler alert, the grave, the tomb is empty. And what it really comes down to is that God is with us, always, now and forever. So we may not be able to be together like we used to this Easter morning, but thanks be to God that we are far, far, far away from being alone.